So firstly, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for being 2 weeks late on this news. I've been wanting to make a video on this for a bit. It's just the fact that my schedule has been so damn hectic, and if I ever changed anything within those last 2 weeks, it would have just made everything a mess. And that all falls on me because my time management is abysmal and still needs a lot of work. So let's just begin with this statement though. Mason Greenwood can rot in hell. About 2 weeks ago, he was arrested on suspicion of and assault. This is alleged, but seeing all the evidence that has come out, it's definitely not in his favor. Mason Greenwood's girlfriend, Harriet Robson, had posted a bunch of stuff on her Instagram story. I'm not going to show you any of the pictures. I'm just going to give you a pretty brief summary of each and every single one of them. So there's a couple images of some bruises, one on her temple and a ton on her knees and I think arm. I couldn't really tell. The worst image was a busted lip where the blood was running down her chest. As for the recordings, in summary, Mason Greenwood was actively trying to rape his girlfriend because he asked politely the first time around and she didn't want to. This guy really pulled the incels nice guy move. What a fucking twat. Now again, this is all alleged, but the evidence is pretty damning. Not only are there images, there's a literal recording. And I don't care what anyone says, no healthy relationship has someone just secretly recording. People will only secretly record their relationships if something is very much wrong. I think a really good example of this is when former NFL player Stice was caught on camera body slamming his wife. Again, this shit doesn't just happen to be caught on footage once in a lifetime. This is a reoccurring pattern. Now, as for the woman who had to endure Mason Greenwood's abhorrent behavior, her name is Harriet Robson, and her bravery should be commended. Domestic abuse isn't just a one-layer type deal. You can't necessarily just leave it, because oftentimes perpetrators will use tactics of manipulation, intimidation, and fear on their victims. That intimidation and fear can turn into paranoia, and that can very much just paralyze someone in the moment. They don't know what to do, and they're scared if they did do something, it wouldn't actually help. This in turn could cause a victim not to speak out, or if they do speak out, they kind of sugarcoat it. It's a terrifying feeling, and I sure hope that none of you have to experience this. But her speaking out, showing Greenwood as a vile creature, allows her to be the symbol of hope for many in situations like hers. Also, one thing I want to mention are the dumb that are using the word alleged to basically disregard all the evidence that has come out. And I get it, okay? Innocent till proven guilty, and there's a lot of cases of false allegations that do need to be discussed as well. But what I've noticed in this specific situation is the word alleged has been used as practically a weapon to silence someone. And in the case of Greenwood, that is highly idiotic. There's also motherfuckers saying there's two sides to every story. I don't want to hear it, man. I do not want to hear it. Now back to Mason. Obviously, his career's over. And good. Oh, this man's really just thrown his starlet career out the window. I don't give a He did it to himself. Now, nothing has been done besides the fact that Manchester United suspended him for 14 days, because that's pretty much the maximum amount of days you can suspend a player. But there's an important detail that people seem to miss out on. And that's the fact that he's still being paid $75K a week. Because nowhere in United's little PR message does it ever talk about Greenwood being suspended without any pay. And another thing, right? Manchester United's Twitter, with a following of over 25 million, mind you, never said one thing about the Greenwood situation, never even posted the club's statement. Most people got news about the club's statement from Fabrizio. But I didn't want to just talk about Greenwood because, especially in a time where people are talking about this, you want to use that to discuss the other past incidents, like Benjamin Mendy. Now, I've talked about Benjamin Mendy previously, but I feel like I just have to restate this. Benjamin Mendy, as we all know, was charged for 1 case of sexual assault and 7 cases of rape. This was between the periods of, by the way, October 2020 and August 2021. Now, Mendy originally was arrested in November of 2020. He continued to play another 18 matches after that. Manchester City knew before everything else, didn't do a single thing until a police report was released to the public. Now here's a more recent one that's just mind-boggling. So David Goodwilly was ruled by a judge in 2017 to have raped a woman. And this year he was purchased by Raith Rovers in the 2nd division of the Scottish League, despite him not showing any remorse of what he did. As a result, a lot of members of the club resigned, and good on them. Rovers manager John McGlynn, after the signing and after all the backlash, has finally started to beg for forgiveness. He claims to be extremely sorry, yet he knew of this man's past. If none of this backlash had ever happened in the first place, nothing would have been said and the world would have kept turning. So if he was really that sorry, he probably just wouldn't have bought the player. But now let's look at all three of these situations again real quick. If higher-ups actually did care and didn't release the most obvious PR templates ever, we'd be seeing the fact that Greenwood distinctly is being suspended without any pay. The same thing goes with Mendy, in fact immediately after he's arrested, by the way. Quite frankly, at this point, just terminate the motherfucker's contract. And finally, had Wraith Rovers actually did care about their club and everyone in their club, they wouldn't have signed David Goodwilly. And again, I can't stress this enough, these are only a mere handful of cases. There's a lot more out there, whether we do know or don't. And speaking of scandals we don't know, well, at least didn't know, there was the whole Iceland FA situation. Pretty much the entire FA resigned after being caught for covering up a player's vile acts. And speaking of cover-ups, I'm just going to use an example outside of football, just to make sure you guys realize just how prevalent this is. Colleges. These motherfuckers are like professionals at covering up sexual assault and cases. In 2019, more than 180,000 grads and undergrads at the University of North Carolina were surveyed, and more than 20% reported being sexually assaulted. And remember, this is just one school out of hundreds in the country, out of thousands outside the US. Now let's talk about the more recent Kurt Zouma incident. I don't need to go into detail of what he did, okay? He drop-kicked a cat. You don't fucking drop-kick a cat. Kurt Zouma did release an apology, but if he was so sorry, why the f did he do it in the first place? RSPCA also did take away his cats, and West Ham fined him $250K. But somehow this situation gets worse. The club played him the very next fucking match. You cannot make this shit up. A man just drop-kicked a cat, animal abuse, but somehow he still gets to play the very next match. David Moyes really said out loud, yeah, I'll let the club handle this situation while I'll handle the football. Completely contradicts the whole fucking point of punishing him. But I can't even blame David Moyes because Kurt Zouma was still available. West Ham just fucking slapped this man's wrist, $250K. Oh, you'll earn that back in basically a month or less. And that's it. That's fucking it. He gets to play the next match. You gotta be fucking kidding me. You actually gotta be serious, man. At least just like try to show you're caring. Like fucking hell. Now, Michail Antonio made his own statements about the Kurt Zouma incident. He obviously condemns what Zouma did, but he also adds a little bit more to what he said, and I just want to talk about that. So he asked the reporter if what Zouma did is worse than racism. Well, obviously not. Antonio then talks about how many players have been racist in the past and are still playing. And then he finishes off his statement by saying that people are wanting Zouma sacked, and then yet again asks, is what Zouma did worse than racism? While I agree with Antonio that there are a lot of incidents of racism where players are still very much playing and have just gotten basically a slap on the wrist from UEFA, I do not really like the way he just uses the question, is it worse than racism? Because that just blatantly disregards the whole animal abuse situation. They're both bad situations, don't get me wrong, but if you're going to use them both as weapons against each other, you're not making any progress in this situation. That's at least my take on the situation. I'm sure there's a lot more differing opinions, and I'd love to hear them in the comments. Now let's just go to the root of all these problems. Why are footballers doing these abhorrent acts? I want to credit Mark Goldbridge for the one statement I'm about to say here. When you give a young kid, teenager, or really anyone in this situation a ton of money and surround them with yes men, you are going to slowly create a monster. Now, this is the key here. Does that take away from the responsibility of what these players have done? No, absolutely not. They chose to do it. They're responsible for it. I don't care about any power dynamic or what actually caused it. They themselves caused harm. It's on them. But if you give someone so much power in the world, it's gonna go to their heads. It doesn't matter who the person is. And that's where power dynamic comes into this. When someone has more power, they're gonna try and act upon that power and make sure the person below them feels very, inferior. But again, I wanna end it off like this. What these players did, it is all on them. It doesn't matter what the root of the cause is. They did it, they're responsible for it, and they should face the consequences. Another thing, a lot of people have been talking about how we shouldn't be canceling Greenwood, we should be counseling him. He just fucking tried to rape someone. I don't want to fucking hear it, like I said before. But that is my take on the video, and yet again, I'm sorry for being so late. I'd love to hear what you guys think down below. I'm sure you guys have tons of great insights, and I'd love to hear them. I'm gonna refrain for the socials this time, so until then, I'll see you guys.